Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released an unusual English language video directed at the Lebanese people, urging them to free themselves from a significant portion of the Lebanese population through the organization Hezbollah. Let's roll a little bit of that.
This is a message to the people of Lebanon. Do you remember when your country was called the Pearl of the Middle East? I do. So what happened to Lebanon? A gang of tyrants and terrorists destroyed it. That's what happened. Lebanon was once known for its tolerance, for its beauty. Today, it's a place of chaos, a place of war. Israel withdrew from Lebanon 25 years ago, but the country that actually conquered Lebanon is not Israel, it's Iran. You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. It doesn't have to be that way.
All right, so we're joined now by Eitan Mubarak, who is an analyst at the National Iranian American Council. Eitan, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Emily. Great to see you. Great to be here. Just a quick note: I'll be speaking today in my personal capacity as a Jewish Iranian American, advocate, not on behalf of NIAC, of my organization, the National Iranian American Council, but I will discuss the organization's work and positions.
Excellent, and we actually prefer that because then people can speak a little bit more freely than if they're speaking on behalf of a large institution. So, Eitan, Netanyahu goes on in that clip to say that the Lebanese people basically have a choice, that they have to, quote, free themselves from Hezbollah, or he's going to turn Lebanon into Gaza. He's going to do to Lebanon what he did to Gaza. And so separating those two things out, first of all, what would it look like for Lebanon to, quote unquote, free itself of Hezbollah?
Well, Ryan, I think it would look a lot like we're seeing in Gaza. And if recent events are any indication, it's likely to look like a lot of what we've already seen. But the bottom line is, the United States and activists are demanding that the United States should not be helping Netanyahu pursue a campaign of regional war with Iran or a regime change in Lebanon while he continues to fail to achieve his strategic goals in Gaza. Instead of preventing a war with Iran and throughout the region, U.S. policy is actively fanning the flames of this conflict. And we need to change course. The fighting in the Middle East broadly over the last year in Yemen, in Syria, in Jordan, where we lost 3 U.S. Service members, and most recently centering Lebanon, Iran, and of course Israel and Palestine, has flown directly in the face of Biden's stated goals of avoiding a regional war. And Netanyahu continues to cross red lines in Gaza, in Rafah, as he inflames tensions and seeks this regional war. And Hezbollah has also carried out heinous attacks on civilians. But they've also stated repeatedly that their attacks will end with a ceasefire in Gaza. And we should be wary of this campaign to distract from the failures of achieving strategic goals there.
And a quick follow-up on that, and then let Emily get in. If we can put up F2, NIAC has helped to organize a coalition against war with Iran. And I've noticed in the reporting over the last few days that the U.S. is not only coordinating with Israel when it comes to Israel's response to Iran's response, the back and forth airstrikes that we're seeing, which would implicate the War Powers Act because it introduces the United States into hostilities. But there's even reporting from the New York Times and elsewhere that the United States is considering its own direct airstrikes on Iran, which would obviously be a flagrant violation of the War Powers Act and the Constitution itself. What's your understanding of the current situation and whether or not the laws on the books have anything to are at all an obstacle in what the United States is considering here?
Yes, Ryan. Yesterday, NBC claimed that U.S. officials discussed joining Israel in offensive strikes against Iran, passing them off as defensive after the fact. And you're right to point out that we need to keep in mind Congress has not declared war on Iran, and that outcome would be disastrous for the region. And it'd be exactly what Netanyahu wants. And some extremist Israeli and U.S. Iran hawk camps are suggesting that this is some kind of generational opportunity to take out Iran. The head of the snake, the eye of the octopus, and what have you. And these calls again are meant to distract from the need for a ceasefire. But in that letter that you mentioned, that NIAC led, signed along with over 80 civil rights, human rights organizations, we're demanding again that the U.S. Not pass any new laws, but just adhere to our basic laws on the books, that we condition offensive weapons in line with the Leahy laws, and there's going to be a historic vote on a joint resolution of disapproval to condition weapons coming up. Senator Sanders is expected to force a vote in mid-November after Congress returns from recess, and that'll be the first straightforward Senate vote on Israel arms sales since January. A crucial opportunity to enforce whether or not to see whether or not the U.S. can enforce its own laws, relative to the Leahy Law and National Security Memorandum 20.
And at the crux of the efforts from those generational calls of people, especially hawkish on this, is the idea that Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map, as they often say. So I'm curious for your perspective, Eitan, on how that central, as somebody who's both Jewish and Iranian, how the characterization of Iran's ultimate goal towards Israel, what do you make of that, especially as it is used to justify potentially extreme responses that could be very, very escalatory?
So, let me just make it clear, as a Jewish Iranian American, my family left Iran. They came to the United States, and many of them live in Israel now, and I have friends and family in Israel who are horrified by this conflict, who are exhausted by the mental toll and strain of this, aside from the Palestinian humanitarian issue. But I think the bottom line for American Jews and the bigger picture around Iran and the regime's calls to annihilate Israel is that the U.S. I'm an American citizen. I can only control what the United States government does, and activists around the country have been laser focused on us doing better. And the U.S. needs to do a better job of stopping this chaotic cycle where Israel, Hezbollah, Iran, proxy parties keep trying to outmaneuver each other and one-up each other, each unwilling to be seen as the one who backs down. This kind of constant cycle of tactical wins in a war that is a strategic loss for everyone involved, for all civilians involved. And we've seen how military solutions play out to solving political problems. And I also want to make it clear, I absolutely condemn the Islamic Republic regime's human rights abuses, and I stand with the Iranian people's movement for self-determination. The regime has been brutal in its treatment of women, journalists, and dissidents of all kinds. And at NIAC, we publish a human rights tracker every single week covering the human rights activists and abuse stories coming out of Iran. But when we analyze these policies and we advocate for policies, we have to acknowledge facts. And the fact is that our policies of maximum pressure, broad economic sanctions, and general isolation and just eliminating of diplomatic off-ramps have undermined U.S. and regional security interests and human rights in the region. Human rights are a disaster all across the region, including in Iran and obviously in Palestine. So our policies, they need to be attached to advancing clear goals. And that needs to be the framing with regards to Iran. And that doesn't mean that in a vacuum conversation, I don't want to see the Iranian regime gone and see a better government that serves the Iranian people. But I don't think the United States and Bibi Netanyahu are the careful executioners of a regime change in Iran, especially given the U.S. legacy of supporting efforts to install and regime change in Iran in 53. So I'll leave it at that. And there's more to talk. Also, there's a template. Sorry to ramble, but no. There's a template for how we can solve this in terms of goals. Like the Iranian nuclear deal, even though it wasn't perfect, it was working to contain Iran's nuclear program and Iran's current president, Pezeshkian, supports it and put together a cabinet. Whatever you think of Pezeshkian, he put together a cabinet of former JCPOA negotiators, in support of a deal that was containing Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief to the Iranian people. And the Trump administration withdrew from it. While Iran was complying, it destroyed goodwill and trust. But there's still a world. I believe that there is still a world where we can re-engage with Iran, even in this moment, and de-escalate the regional conflicts and deal with the nuclear issue. But it's not going to come if the U.S. continues to be unwillingly or be dragged along into a five-front regional war at Netanyahu's behest.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about, by the way, I forgot to mention that I would bring this up, but I don't know, did you notice that Netanyahu yesterday, or the Israeli government yesterday, put out basically an infographic with a bunch of targets of people that it intended to assassinate at some point going forward. And on that was Ali al-Sistani, one of the most revered figure, maybe the most revered, cleric or religious figure on the of the Shia faith. Somebody who met the Pope, fairly recently, a apolitical spiritual leader, and a lot of people were shocked to see his face with the target on it, along with like Hezbollah commanders and Hamas, and like I think Yahya Sinwar or something was on there. I don't know if you saw that, but is that rippling through the Shia community at all?
So I can't speak to it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's different area over there. So anyway, I also wanted to ask you about the Irish. If you have any sense of where the situation with the Irish, speaking of my own sect, the Irish in Lebanon, the IDF has kind of ordered these Irish peacekeepers, to basically get out of their way, and the Irish are seeing. We can put up F3, by the way. This is a VO of of some IDF soldiers raising a flag in southern Lebanon. Rather provocative act, and certainly not beating the charges of a planned occupation of southern Lebanon by doing that. The Irish troops have said that they have not been directly threatened by the IDF. Hezbollah has said that they will not fire at IDF troops who are anywhere near the Irish because they don't want to catch the Irish. What do you make of the kind of this UN peacekeeping role of the Irish kind of refusing to back down? And what's your sense of how things are going broadly in Israel's ground invasion? Well,
I know that the Irish Prime Minister on the global stage has been one of the most outspoken proponents of Palestinian human rights and critics of the alleged war crimes committed by the IDF. Within this, I'm glad to see peacekeeping forces involved and trying to stand in solidarity amidst with the Lebanese people. We've seen with the ground invasion so far, 2,000 Lebanese folks killed, 1 million displaced. And while the IDF and the Israelis maintain a strategic advantage in terms of airstrikes, the ground invasion, there are questions, especially considering the recent operation that saw 8 IDF soldiers killed. I mean, the fact is, I think more broadly, this is one of the darkest periods in the region, in the region's history. But it still doesn't have to be like this. We need to call out as Jews, as Americans. Obviously, we need to call out the call and call out anti-Semitism and escalation from the one side calling to destroy Israel. But we also need to call out and condemn this greater Israel expansion dream, along with ethnic cleansing and occupation in Lebanon and in the West Bank ongoing. No side, despite these calls to eliminate the Israelis from the one side and calls to expand Israel into these states on the other, no side is going anywhere, in my opinion. Despite the regime change fantasies, no side is going away, and we need to just embrace the sustainable path through diplomacy and negotiations. I don't see the ground invasion in Lebanon, eliminating Hezbollah. They may have degraded them. They may significantly, certainly some decapitation strategy has worked in that sense. But there's a lot of international relations scholars that have questioned the efficacy of decapitation tactics.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Ethan, we wanted to get your reaction to a fairly viral confrontation that Liam Cosgrove of Gray Zone had with State Department spokesman Matthew Miller yesterday. Ryan was there for it, so he'll have probably some color to add to the conversation. But this is Liam questioning Matt Miller on escalation, essentially. We can roll this clip.
We often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khamenei, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech, there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, it is a genocide.
You are
abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine for this proxy war.
Plenty of other places to give a speech.
So the question, I guess, was what gives you the right?
How dare you?
Yeah. What does give the United States the right? So if you have a response to that, go for it. We just wanted to kind of make sure that we had that as a chaser to the program.
Yeah, what do you make of it, Edon?
Look, I share the frustration, in the question, and frankly, I'm an organizer. We work, at NIAC. We have 14 volunteer chapters and thousands of members and allies around the country, and we've been organizing meetings at every chance we can for the last year with members of Congress and their staff, trying to call for no war with Iran, ceasefire, no weapons for war crimes, UNRWA funding, by the way, another huge issue, and diplomacy first. And in these meetings, people get extremely emotional, and Democrats have failed, frankly, to, in my opinion, properly engage with Middle Eastern, Arab, Muslim communities on this, and with progressives generally. They've, there was a moment of hope when Kamala replaced Biden and when Pezeshkian got elected, but right now we're not. I don't have so much faith in the administration right now, certainly before the election, to make any significant departures from what has been. And again, the clip aside, I would just love to reiterate some of the things that activists have been calling for. Again, with the war powers, with diplomacy, with Iran, with rejecting this war, the great statements from some members of Congress, folks like Representative McGovern, Jayapal, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Senator Van Hollen, et cetera. And the UNRWA Restoration Act was just introduced, which is a huge potential issue in addressing the humanitarian crisis. So, but I feel for that reporter. I'm glad I don't have to be in those rooms, because I might lose it. Constituent meetings are much better.
Yeah, that was It's like there was a question there. Where do you get off, basically? Where do you get the right to say the things you say?
Right.
Yeah. Itam Mubarak, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.